In January, America rolled a brand new war machine onto a stage in Detroit. 6 months later, Russia's answer is finally taking physical shape. It's 10 tanks, 10 individual vehicles for the entire year, a number so small it reads like a typo. And the strangest part is how we found out. Moscow didn't announce it. The number leaked out of a factory in the Ural Mountains, buried in paperwork Russia never wanted anyone to read. So today that paperwork gets open. Inside it sits a radar shield that a Russian expert admits can't see the weapons actually killing their tanks. And buried deeper, a moment when Moscow's defense industry stopped building for the battlefield and started building for the camera. Literally for the camera. There's a propaganda movie involved. But first, a man named Sergei needs to get something off his chest. Sergei Chemezov runs Rostec, the state conglomerate that oversees nearly all of Russia's weapons production. When the topic of American tank upgrades came up, Chemezov told lawmakers that Russian armor received its all-round drone protection first, and that when it comes to the Abrams, and quote, they've copied it from us. Copied it from us. That's the official position of the Russian defense industry in 2026. There was no promise to match it and no claim of superiority. The official argument is that Washington is stealing their homework. Now, when a man in charge of an arsenal starts arguing about who thought of something first, that usually tells you the arsenal itself isn't ready for inspection. So let's inspect it. Quick refresher on what has Moscow talking, because this thing has moved fast. The M1E3 Abrams, the tank we covered when it debuted at the Detroit Auto Show, parked somewhere between the pickup trucks and the minivans, which is a very American way to unveil a weapon of war. Since that reveal, it stopped being a showpiece. The Army has taken delivery of the first prototype, with more vehicles arriving through 2026 to form a full test platoon under a program called Transforming in Contact. 1st Cavalry Division gets to break them in. The design sheds roughly 10 tons compared to the current Abrams and cuts fuel consumption by about half. And if you've ever towed anything with a gas guzzler through Texas in July, you understand why the crews are thrilled. Look at who's building it though, because the supplier list is the real message. Caterpillar handles propulsion. Anduril, the Silicon Valley defense firm, is working on the autonomy functions alongside a software outfit called Applied Intuition. The tractor company and the tech bros are building a tank together. Somewhere in Nevada, a retired master sergeant just felt a disturbance in the force. The point is this: the American machine now has a delivery schedule, which meant the Kremlin needed one too. Enter Object 188M2. That's the factory designation. The public will come to know it as the T-90M2. Program name Ryvok. The Dash. It's the deepest revision of Russia's frontline tank since the T-90M itself. And everything we know about it comes from internal Ural Vagonzavod documents obtained by the Ukrainian analyst group Frontelligence Insight during the spring and summer of last year. One letter from June 2025 requests engine sensors for Object 188M2 by name. Even the engineers got exposed. A man named Andrei Rukmanko listed his work on the project right in his professional biography, which is the defense industry equivalent of posting your crime on Facebook. To be fair to Moscow, the paperwork shows this program was already moving before Detroit. The M1E3 didn't create the T-90M2. What Detroit did was start the clock, because now both countries have a next-generation tank with a date attached, and only one of them gets to hide its numbers. Well, gotta hide them, past tense. So what does Russia's answer actually improve? According to those leaked documents, the T-90M2 gets a revised fighting compartment. The transmission is being refined, finally addressing the reverse gear, a shortcoming the documents describe as particularly lacking, and one that Ukrainian drone footage has been demonstrating in high definition for 4 years. Crews also get larger video displays, specified in writing as no less than 38 centimeters diagonal. Read that spec sheet back slowly. America's next tank carries a hybrid electric roadmap with an unmanned turret and a sealed crew capsule. Russia's next tank backs up better and comes with a bigger telly. British viewers will recognize this move. It's the automotive equivalent of fixing the boiler by painting the radiator. Then comes the number, and the number is the story. Frontelligence's documents state that T-90M2 production, quote, is scheduled to begin modestly, with just 10 units planned for 2026. 10. For scale, the open-source tracker Oryx has visually confirmed over 4,300 Russian tanks lost in Ukraine. And that's only the wrecks that ended up on camera. The real figure sits somewhere above that, arguing with the official one in a dark room. Against losses like that, 10 new hulls isn't a production run, it's a rounding error with a paint job. If you're enjoying the breakdown so far, do us a favor and hit subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel, and unlike a Russian production schedule, we actually deliver every week. Now, an honest analyst gives you the other side of that ledger, so here it is. The same document set lays out a long-term plan. At least 1,783 T-90M and T-90M2 tanks built, modernized, or overhauled between 2026 and 2036, with over 1,100 of those crammed into the 3 peak years from 2027 to 2029. And Russian industry has genuinely surged before. Output roughly tripled in 2 years, with 2024 production estimated around 280 to 300 tanks. The ambition on that paper is real, but paper is patient. Factories aren't. The tank designed to answer America exists this year in single digits, and the 1,100 tank crescendo depends on a wartime economy holding together through the exact years when sanctions, labor shortages, and component hunger bite hardest. It's a mortgage on a house that's currently on fire. And that mortgage has a second lien on it that Moscow talks about even less. Those production plans lean heavily on refurbishing tanks pulled from Soviet-era storage, and the warehouses are running dry. Researchers from the Resurgam analysis platform, working from satellite imagery of Russian storage bases, calculated that by February of last year, over 2,000 tanks had already been dragged out of open-air storage, with roughly 2,000 more pulled from the closed hangars. The vehicles left behind are the ones nobody wanted first. Worse, the same researchers found the pace of restoration has collapsed to roughly a quarter of what it was in 2022. The easy refurbishments are done, and what remains is rust with a serial number. So when that leak chart promises 1,100 tanks in 3 years, remember what's feeding the production line. It's not a warehouse, it's a scrapyard with optimism. And the production number isn't even the deepest problem. The deepest problem is the shield. The entire survivability pitch of Russia's modernized armor rests on a system called Arena-M, a hard-kill active protection system. Radar spots an incoming threat, computer calculates the intercept, and a protective charge detonates the threat mid-air before it touches the tank. In early January, Russian Defense Ministry officials confirmed engineers had finished a software update giving Arena-M a dedicated anti-drone mode. Then on July 4th, of all possible dates, imagery surfaced that appears to show an Arena-M-equipped T-90M on a transporter outside a factory setting for the first time. If confirmed, that's the system finally leaving the showroom. Here's where a Russian expert torpedoes his own side's flagship. Viktor Murakovsky is one of Russia's best-known military analysts, a former tank officer, not some Western think tank guy. In his technical commentary on the program, Murakovsky stated that Arena-M's radar struggles to detect and classify small, low-visibility targets, specifically mini and micro drones built from radio-transparent materials, plastic in other words. Sit with that. Russia built a radar shield for the drone war, and by the admission of their own analyst, it has trouble seeing the drones. The cheap FPV quadcopter, the weapon responsible for most of the tank kills in this war, is largely made of the one material the system looks straight through. That's not a design flaw. That's designing a smoke detector that can't smell smoke. And the economics behind that blind spot are brutal. A T-90M runs about $4.5 million per vehicle. The drone that kills it costs a few hundred. Ukrainian units, like the 429th Unmanned Systems Regiment, the one they call Achilles, have turned that price gap into a production process, putting swarm after swarm onto the most expensive armor Russia fields. Over 100 T-90M variants have already been lost this way, which stings twice for Moscow, because the T-90M fleet was never large to begin with. Every hull that burns represents months of factory time erased by something assembled on a folding table. Arena M was supposed to flip that equation. Instead, by their own experts' admission, the $4.5 million tank still can't reliably see the folding table weapon coming. It gets worse in close quarters. Arena M's countercharges detonate right next to the hull and spray fragments outward, which is survivable news for the tank and terrible news for any infantry walking beside it. In a trench fight or an urban block, the tank's own bodyguard becomes a hazard to the men it's supposed to be supporting. Western analysts note the system was originally built to swat anti-tank missiles, which fly fast and show up beautifully on radar. The interceptor math was never written for a slow plastic quadcopter wobbling in from an ugly angle. And if you want to know how this movie ends, Russia already filmed it. Years back, Moscow announced that T-72s fitted with active protection were heading to the front. According to reporting on the program, those tanks never arrived at the battlefield. They were used in the production of a propaganda film instead. The armor built to stop drones ended up stopping nothing more dangerous than a camera crew. You couldn't write it, although apparently someone in Moscow did with a budget and a director. There's one more gap between these two machines, and it's the one Russia cannot patch with a software update because it's welded into the hull. The M1E3 seats its three-man crew inside an armored capsule in the front of the tank, physically separated from the ammunition. If the turret takes a catastrophic hit, the crew compartment is designed to stay intact. Russia's tank family, including this shiny new M2, still feeds its gun from a carousel autoloader that stores propellant in a ring directly beneath the crew. When that carousel cooks off, the turret leaves the tank like a champagne cork, and everyone watching this channel has seen that footage more times than they'd like. The M2's revised fighting compartment rearranges the furniture. The explosives stay under the seats. The tragic part for Moscow is that they solved this once. The T-14 Armata had an unmanned turret and a proper crew capsule. On paper, a genuinely modern answer. That program never delivered vehicles into real service, which is precisely why the T-90M wears the crown today. Russia's actual next-generation tank died in development, so the job went to the understudy, and the understudy is a Soviet hull wearing 2026 accessories. Step back and look at the whole board, because the timelines tell the story better than any single spec. This summer, American soldiers begin operational testing on a platoon of M1E3 prototypes, with feedback flowing straight into the design before fielding in the 2030s. Across the ocean, Russia's answer trickles out of a single functioning tank plant at a rate you could count on your fingers, wearing a protection system its own experts question, riding a hull architecture the war has spent 4 years dismantling. Credit where it's genuinely due. Russia got a domestically built hard-kill system onto its production tanks while Western armies still bolt on an Israeli import. And their layered approach, stacking reactive armor, electronic warfare, roof screens, and interception is a coherent doctrine that NATO planners study seriously. The thinking is sound, the execution is running on an industrial base held together with sanctions workarounds and overtime. Which brings us back to Sergei Chemezov, standing in front of lawmakers, insisting America copied Russia. Maybe there's a grain of truth in it. Ideas do travel. But here's the scoreboard as it stands. One country's so-called copy is rolling into soldier trials with Caterpillar horsepower and Silicon Valley brains. The other country's original is 10 tanks, a radar that can't see plastic, and a supporting film credit. If that's plagiarism, it's the first case in history where the student got expelled and the cheater made the honor roll. So here's the question for the comments, and I genuinely want the old tankers and the skeptics arguing about this one. That leaked Russian plan promises nearly 1,800 modernized tanks by 2036. The Pentagon promises M1E3 fielding in the early 2030s. Two promises, two timelines, two very different track records. Which one do you actually believe reaches the finish line, and which one ends up in a movie? If this breakdown earned it, hit like and subscribe, because next week we're going deeper into the machines this war is quietly making obsolete. Some of them are wearing NATO flags. That one's going to ruffle feathers. See you there.